Hello and welcome to Outdoor Instructor Chat. My name is Niall from Instructor 101 for outdoor instructors that want to make an even bigger impact on those that they work with. In this episode of Outdoor Instructor Chat, I was joined by Brett Friedman from Adventure Otaku. Now, Brett is someone that I've followed on Instagram and YouTube for a long time. It's someone that I've kind of admired a lot because there's just so much knowledge and experience there that I just wanted to unpack for a long time. So make sure to check out his stuff online as well. Brett is an outdoor educator based in North Carolina, and we cover all sorts of different topics, including his experience as a sea kayaker, including one of the trips that he did, which involved paddling the Inside Passage in Alaska, how to make your CV or resume stand out as an outdoor instructor, motivation as an outdoor instructor and managing your own development. We also talk about self-care and the all-important quick-fire-ish questions. Right, that's enough from me. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Outdoor Instructor Chat. So today I'm joined by Brett. So Brett, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I feel like I wish I'd reached out to you a lot sooner. I've watched a lot of your YouTube videos and your stuff on your Instagram as well. There's lots going on there, but I'm going to give you a chance for you to introduce yourself. Where can people find you? And then, yeah, we'll take it from there.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, Niall. So my name is Brett. I'm based in central North Carolina on the east coast of the United States. I run a YouTube channel called Adventure Otaku and an Instagram called, which is at adventure.otaku. There is a pretty stagnant website blog that is languishing at the same address at adventureotaku.com. And I've been on Instagram for a long time, but I really started YouTube about a year ago. And so, or I should say I got serious about YouTube about a year ago. And I'm an outdoor educator. I teach a lot of things, but primarily kayaking and navigation and wilderness medicine and things like that. And I've been working in the outdoor education industry for close to 20 years. I think I'm at about 18 years. So a really long time.
Nice. I'm with all of this stuff for those of you that are listening and watching. We'll make sure there's links to everything involved with the Adventure Otaku in the description below. I'll make sure I'll try and flash up some things across the screen as well. So cool. Yeah, Brett, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I feel like we've hit the ground running. I absolutely love it. First of all, I kind of wanted to ask about otaku. Like, it's not a term that I was familiar with, and yeah, I just wanted to see if you could expand on that first of all.
So it was probably not the wisest choice. Originally, the website was Paddling Otaku, and otaku, O-T-A-K-U, is a Japanese word that essentially means a person with an obsessive interest. And so I started my website as a method to make myself write, because I wanted to write a paddling instruction book. And the paddling instruction book that I wrote, the first book that I wrote, is called Enlightened Kayaking, and it blends my love of paddling with a study of the martial arts, which I also do, along with my study of Buddhism, and sort of merges the three of them together. So there's a lot of mindfulness and things like that. And because I think that if you're going to publish a book, you should make it as niche as possible. So it's not even just kayaking, it's sea kayaking. And then let's add in martial arts and Buddhism. So the joke that I tell people, and I think this is actually in a video I posted a little while ago, is if you're one of the 12 people that bought that book, Enlightened Kayaking, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's incredibly niche. So it started off as a process. And so it forced me to sit down and create written content on a weekly basis. And really what I did was I published 3 times a week for about a year. And 2 of the postings, like I think it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 of the postings were stuff that would be in the book and expanded on in the book, but it forced me to write. And then the third posting of the week, usually a Wednesday, was like whatever I wanted to talk about, a piece of gear or something going on in the outdoor industry or something like that. And so really it just forced me to sit down and write. And a lot of people who write have a hard time with sort of doing that. And I found that wasn't a huge problem for me. I can pretty much sit down and kick out, 2,000 words in 45 minutes or something. It may not be great, but I'm getting words on pages. But it sort of taught me the process of how to write. I'm not trained to be a writer. I decided I was going to write a book about paddling because it was something I enjoyed and was
Hey everyone, so we
passionate
had a
about.
very minor technical difficulty at that point, and it just cut out. But after that, it's absolutely fine. So just like all good outdoor instructors, we adapted, overcome, and just rolled with it. So yeah, let's carry on with the show.
Cool. We'll take it. We'll roll with it.
We'll roll with it.
That's what we do, outdoor instructors. We
Exactly.
adapt,
improvise, overcome is the rule I use. So I wrote a bigger book, a trip planning book called Go, and then I wrote. I've written 4, and I think I've got a 5th coming. Little tiny, like 40-page books, just to help people get started, and they're called the Simple Guides. So there's a simple guide to backpacking, which is like how to fit a backpack, how to load a backpack, how to plan a simple trip. And then there's a simple guide to stand-up paddleboard, a simple guide to kayaking. I think there's another one too. I don't remember what it is. And I'm writing now a simple guide to kayak camping, which is actually just about done and should be out in a couple months. And so I self-publish all these books. I don't have a publisher, and I make a little bit of money, not a whole lot of money, but just a little bit of money. But it's a fun process. And so that led to Instagram so that I could market the books, and that led to YouTube because my background a million years ago is in the film industry. So I've always been comfortable with cameras in my hand.
Nice. That sounds actually quite similar to how the idea started for Instructor 101, actually. So I'm going to have to pick your brains later after the show about
Happily.
the self-publishing stuff, because that was the original idea for Instructor 101, to write down like 101 ideas or short little tips for outdoor instructors, and then lots of things came out of that evolved from that. And so yeah, there isn't a book, and I've kind of stopped writing stuff. But
but that's what happens. So I wrote Enlightened Kayaking 3 times before I decided on what I really wanted it to be. So I wrote big chunks of that book, and I was like, no, this is what it needs to be, and this is how it's going to work. And then once I sort of figured that out, it was pretty easy just to move through everything I wanted to cover. And actually, so the book that I'm writing right now, in process of writing, is doesn't have a title yet, but it's not for outdoor instructors, but it's tips from outdoor instructors. And so I pulled in a bunch of instructors that I know, and I'm like, hey, for a month, I'm going to send you a couple of questions via email, and you tell me what your answers are, and I'll include them in the book. So yeah. So we're working on the same book with a slightly different market, but that's okay. There's plenty of people out there.
It's all right. Well, yeah, we'll work alongside it. We'll get on with it.
Yeah.
That's, but in all seriousness, let me know how you get on with that, because when you are ready, I'll make sure to share that with the one-on-one community as well. So
I appreciate that. Yeah. We have to work together.
Very definitely have to. So obviously, I watch a lot of your YouTube videos as well, and they're a great source of information and knowledge. For those that don't know, there's stuff on gear advice, tips. There's sea kayaking based stuff as well. Yeah,
there's a fair amount of kayaking stuff. Yeah,
and progressive now into sailing as well. But so it's all really good. And some of your more recent videos have been about some of the journeys or expeditions that you've done in the past. One of them including the Inside Passage, which is something that, to be honest, I'd never heard of up until that point.
And it's the equivalent of the Appalachian Trail, but for kayaking, which should give you an idea of how many people are going out in kayaks to do trips like that, is that no one's heard of it. So if you haven't heard of it, the Inside Passage is a stretch of water that really starts in Seattle on the west coast of the United States and goes up to Skagway, Alaska. And I think in total it's just under 2,000 miles. And it's called the Inside Passage because the bulk of the route hugs the coast of North America, but is protected from the Pacific Ocean by dozens or hundreds of barrier islands. And so during the gold rush, to get to Alaska, boats use the Inside Passage because it was protected waters. So protected waters being the key, it makes for amazing paddling. And so I didn't really have any interest in doing the Seattle portion. I've paddled around cities enough in my life. And when I became an instructor for the National Outdoor Leadership School, which I think we'll talk about a little bit, my instructor course was from the north end of Vancouver Island up about 3/4 of the way through British Columbia to a little tiny town called Bella Bella, which I realized about halfway through our course. I was like, wait a minute, I'm paddling a section of the Inside Passage. And so I decided then I needed to do the rest of it. Primarily, I needed to do the Alaska section. So the Alaska section goes from Juneau, Alaska to Skagway, Alaska, and is about, depending on how the route you take and how you measure it, about 350 miles. And it was the kind of trip that I would talk to people about and be like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to do the Inside Passage. And they would say, oh yeah, that sounds cool. I've always wanted to do it too. And that went on for at least a decade. Hey, this is a thing I'd really like to do that I've always wanted to do. And in the process, I read tons of books about it and I bought some charts, but never really did anything about it. And then I'm not quite sure what happened, but it was sort of like, I've got to either stop talking about this or do this. And so I decided that I was gonna do the trip, even if I had to do it alone. And so I went into work. I work as an outdoor educator. It's easy to find people who are interested in the idea of something like this. And I put on a dry erase board on a wall, hey, I'm going to paddle the Inside Passage next year. And if you want to go, meet me at this coffee shop at this time, and we'll talk about the trip. And so I got there at the designated time, and there were 10 people there who were like, yes, I want to go. And I was like, awesome. I don't know how we're going to get all of these people and all of this gear to the west coast of the United States and then up to Alaska, but we'll deal with that problem as we get closer. And it wasn't a problem because in the ensuing year, everyone dropped out. So 6 weeks before my trip, I was going alone, and I had spent money on gear. I had time off from work. I had everything set up. I was like, I've got to just do this. And at the last minute, I called a friend of mine who lives in Vancouver, who's a paddling instructor that I know. And I said to her, hey, I'm just going to throw this out there. On this date, I'm paddling the Inside Passage. I'm driving to Skagway, Alaska. I'm taking the ferry south to Juneau and then paddling back to my car north. I'd love to have you come along. You're a great paddler. I really don't want to do this alone, but I'm going to do it alone. If you say no, I'm going anyway. And she emailed me back like 15 minutes later and was like, let me clear it with work, but I think I'm in. And I was like, yes. So she lives in Vancouver. We met in Juneau, Alaska. I got there, I think, the day before her. And there were like 8 million, like I drove to Alaska with my kayak on the roof of my car. So many logistical things could have gone wrong. And we ended up in Juneau when we needed to be. The weather was perfect. We got in boats like 4 hours after she got off the ferry and started paddling north. And it became the Paddle North videos, which are on my YouTube channel. And originally it was 3 different videos. I had them on another service on Vimeo. And I've lost all the files. So I realized I could download the files, the edited videos from Vimeo, and I just sort of reposted them over on YouTube. So the quality's not great. They were shot entirely with GoPro Hero 3s. But they're good little videos, and I'm super proud of them. And I'm really proud of that trip. And so she had a shorter window she had to get back to work. And so we spent like the first week and a half racing north. We were like, the weather could change at any moment. We've got great weather. We could be stuck on a beach for a week in bad weather. And the weather cooperated almost entirely. And we planned the trip for 30 days. We did it in 21 and ended up taking 3 rest days. So we flew up the Inside Passage. I mean, flew. We were in sea kayaks. We were going 3 miles an hour. That's flying. But it's an amazing part of the country. It's an amazing part of the world. And as you said, most people don't know about it. And so I forget what I did this sort of research. I think it might have been for a blog post in 2017. So like the pinnacle of long distance hiking is the Appalachian Trail. And you could make arguments that there are other trails, but the AT is super famous. The pinnacle of long distance kayak touring is the Inside Passage, and no one's heard of it. And so there is a registry. If you're going to paddle the Inside Passage, there's a registry. Hey, this is what I'm doing. This is when I'm going. And I'm sure that there are people that do it that don't use the registry, but you can look back and see how many people paddled it. And so the year that I paddled it, 7 other people paddled it the same year. The same year, 2,000 people hiked to the AT. And so my long-standing thing is like, people carrying backpacks, get in a kayak. The food is better. You don't have something heavy on your back, and there's no one out there. Go kayaking. And so I've been watching, and there are like 8. So I think the year I did it, there were 7 or 8 people. And since then, that was 2011. Since then, there has never been a year with that many paddlers on the Inside Passage. So yeah, it's an absolutely amazing place. And no one goes there. When I mention it, most people say, "Oh, I did a cruise on the Inside Passage." And I said, "Oh, really? So did you cruise from Juneau to Skagway?" And they say, "Yes." And I say, "That's amazing. I kayaked from Juneau to Skagway." And then they pause for a second and they're like, "Excuse me, what?" They kind of can't fathom that I kayaked where they spent a week cruising, but it's absolutely beautiful. And the weather is overcast and rainy. It's technically a rainforest. So a fair amount of rain, but the rain is pretty light. It's drizzly and overcast, and you get some sunny days. But when the weather is bad, it goes from like 2-mile-an-hour winds to 40-mile-an-hour winds. So the question of should we stay on the beach is very easy to figure out. It's like, if there's whitecaps, let's just stay on the beach because it's really blowing out there. So yeah, it's a great trip.
It sounds it, and like you reminded me that I think sometimes the hardest, one of the hardest things about those sorts of trips, I mean, is actually is getting to the starting point.
You're absolutely right. And so I did a talk at a kayak festival about planning big trips, and I started off with talking about, tell me why you can't do a big trip. What are the reasons? And the reasons that people give you are always the same. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have the skills. And then a big one, which is a little bit harder to explain, is I don't have the permission. And the permission it means my spouse or my partner or my job won't let me go and take 6 weeks off to do something like kayak the Inside Passage. And what I tell people is all of those things are resource problems, right? So I spent 18 months really planning and prepping for the Inside Passage. And when I started the process, I was like, I need a new kayak. My kayak is great, but it's not suitable for holding the amount of gear I need. And I need a dry suit. And I need a couple of other little things. I ended up buying like a VHF radio and some stuff like that. But a new kayak and a dry suit is a lot of money. And I'm an outdoor educator. I don't make a lot of money. So I skipped buying coffee out every day for a year and a half. And that didn't cover all of it, but it covered a lot of it. And so that's a relatively, the money aspect is relatively easy to get through. The skills problem is relatively easy to get through. You work on your skills while you're getting ready to go, and you seek out people to help you with the skills that you need, whatever the trip it is you want to do. The permission one is most of the time people don't ask. They say, "Oh, my boss would never let me do that." Well, have you asked your boss? Frame it in a way that benefits them. Hey, how would you like to have 6 weeks of not paying me? Or how would you like me to come back and be completely refreshed and really able to focus on my job instead of thinking about how I want to be away from my desk? So it's about framing. And that's the problem, is that it's super easy to come up with reasons why you can't do a trip like that. But with all those reasons are in our heads. And then the cool thing that you learn is that once you realize how easy it is, I was back in Alaska 2 years after the Inside Passage doing another month-long trip. And so once you realize this is easy, I can do this, the hurdles are not that hard. Now I've already got the gear, right? It's not that hard. And that's the thing that holds people back is it's so easy to find a reason why you can't do something.
Yeah, you're so right. And it's fascinating. One of the things that I scribbled down there is you mentioned that one of the things that can hold us back is not necessarily having or feeling that like we have the right skills. So you might have the right skill set, you just aren't too sure. So that could be
right.
Thing. but also you're saying that you can work towards it. And I find like something that, I mean, these are all things that I'm definitely guilty of, and I've had time to reflect on over this period where I've been locked down and we've got COVID going on. But once you've set a time frame of when you're going to work towards something by, if you care enough, you're going to go and do it. So
absolutely,
yeah. So you will gain the skills if you care enough, if you're proactive enough. Obviously, you got to act on this, but yeah, if you set that time frame, then I'd say for the most part, yeah, you are going to have the skills or the knowledge base, or at least the ability to make informed decisions as to what is appropriate or what's safe.
Sure. In my book, the trip planning book, Go, there's a chapter on sort of working through this, and I highlight two people. One is a guy that I know who decided, he was the founder of the North Carolina Beard and Mustache Club. And every year there's an international beard and mustache competition that he goes to. And one year it was in Anchorage, Alaska, and he decided he was going to ride his motorcycle from North Carolina to Anchorage, Alaska, to go to the Beard and Mustache Championship. Now, the thing is, he didn't own a motorcycle. He didn't know how to ride a motorcycle, and he didn't have any money for a motorcycle. And he needed, again, like 6 weeks off. And he worked through all those problems to figure out how to make it happen. And he ended up, he did 6 weeks on his motorcycle. He drove all around Alaska, up to the Northwest Territories in Canada. He dipped his toes in the Arctic Ocean and drove home. He drove something like 16,000 miles in 6 weeks. Another person that I talk about in my book is a woman named Molly, who I had in a couple classes. So I had her in a navigation class, and then a couple weeks later, I saw her in a backcountry cooking class. And then I think I saw her in one other, and we got to talking just because I was seeing her all the time. And it turned out that she worked in an office her whole life. She was a runner, so she had a good sort of basis for fitness, but she worked behind a desk, behind a computer. And she was like, I want to be doing things outside. I want to have an outdoor lifestyle. And so I've taken classes to learn how to do that. I later found out that she had set a goal for herself to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and she did it later that year. And so I have a picture of her in the book on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. So two people who didn't have the skills, didn't have the background, didn't have the experience. You just sort of work through that process. What do I need to do the things that I want to do, that I want to accomplish? It's the problem is saying, yes, that's what I'm going to do. That's what people struggle with.
Oh, so good. I'm already getting like psyched and slightly inspired and ready just to go out now. Like interview, end of chat, let's go. Like, yeah, it's so true. I love it. So all that aside, so what's motivated you to work in outdoor education? Because I think people can do it for lots of different reasons, and potentially we've touched on a couple of bits there. But it'd be interesting.
Yeah, and so my background is I worked I'm from New York City originally. I worked in the film industry and then the photography industry after that. And they're both great industries, and I learned a ton and worked with amazing people. But at the end of the day, we were spending a lot of money really to advertise things to people. And I wanted to be having more of an impact in my day-to-day life. I wanted to be helping people, but I wasn't quite sure how. And so I played with things around. I was already active in the outdoors. Keep in mind, this is like the mid to early 1990s. I was already a rock climber, and in a time when there was no such thing as a rock gym. And so because of that, when people got interested in learning how to rock climb, someone would say, oh, you need to talk to Brett. He rock climbs. He'll take you out. And so I sort of started informally teaching. And then as I thought about things that I wanted to do, I did a course with the National Outdoor Leadership School, which uses outdoor education as a venue for teaching leadership skills. So I went to them to learn how to sea kayak because I had taught myself to rock climb. Really bad idea. Don't do that. And I was like, I don't want to self-teach myself to kayak. So I'm going to go to them. And yeah, if I get some leadership stuff, great. I'll throw an aside out there. I use the leadership stuff that I learned from them on a daily basis. It, makes everything. It's a skill that you don't think about, or a set of skills that you don't think about that is incredibly useful. Okay, we'll come back to that later if you want. So I did a Knowles kayaking course in 2000, and I left there saying, okay, I want to definitely be working in the outdoors. I don't want to go back to a photo studio, which is dark and filled with smoke and horrible. But I don't know how to do that. So I just sort of spent some time working on my skills, both as an educator and as a paddler primarily. And again, people said, oh, you want to learn how to kayak, talk to Brett, because Brett's a paddler and he teaches people how to paddle. So it honestly, it became a business. I did everything in cash and it was like, oh yeah, I'll give you kayaking lessons and I've got a couple boats and I've got all the gear we need and it costs this much and we'll do like 2 hours. So that was really how I started teaching. And then in 2006, no, before that, I realized I wanted to be teaching, so I needed a wilderness medicine certification. So I went off and I got a wilderness first responder certification and really enjoyed it, and decided I wanted to sort of continue with this and in terms of my knowledge. And so I became an emergency medical technician, and then later on became a paramedic, which is another level up. And ended up then essentially at some point working on an ambulance for a handful of 3 or 4 years. I inadvertently built, with my different jobs and sort of career choices, the perfect resume for someone who wants to be an outdoor educator, right? So I had this resume of outdoor experiences, but also I had a background in photography and film, which the photography then was more important because there wasn't such a thing as YouTube. But employers were like, really, can you supply us with photos from the trips that we send you on? I was like, yeah, sure, piece of cake. And then I got deeply into emergency medicine, and employers were like, gee, so if there's a problem on a trip, you've actually treated thousands of patients? I was like, yes, I have. And so everyone has a wilderness first responder certification. A handful of people have an EMT. Very few people are stupid enough to get a paramedic certification to work in the outdoor industry. I was the one. And so it made my resume pop, and it made it easier for me to find work. And so in 2006, I decided to go back to Knowles and do a kayak instructor course, which was in British Columbia, which is where I paddled the first section of the Inside Passage with them. And that was 6 weeks of paddling in British Columbia in April. It was cold, it was wet, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And I taught for Knowles Wilderness Medicine I taught for Knowles Expeditions for 3 or 4 years before I sort of got pulled over to the Knowles Wilderness Medicine side. The month-long courses that I taught for Knowles were a ton of fun, but a little bit hard on relationships. Whereas the wilderness medicine courses are a weekend. Not quite as fun, but still fun, but a lot easier on having sort of a normal life, And so that was something I was cognizant of as I share my life with someone, and I need to be respectful of her time and her needs and things like that. So disappearing for a month all the time is not always a good thing for that. So if I keep her happy, I get to keep doing things in the outdoors.
Win-win.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the leadership skills or the things.
Yeah.
From here we go, the National Outdoor Leadership School.
Yeah.
And you were just saying that it's worked it's just applied in so many different ways.
It sort of gives you the ability to sort of think about, you talk a fair amount about group dynamics. And so it gives you a skill set for working with a group and helping that group sort of figure out what they need to do and how to get where they need to go. And leadership, like when you ask someone to define leadership, they stumble. No one can really define it. Or they tend to think of like a general barking orders, which is a form of leadership, but it exists on a continuum, right? And so it can be, hey, we need to do this right now. Or it can be on the other end of that continuum. What do you guys think we need to do? Not even I know what we need to do, but I'm going to say, what do you guys think we need to do? And let them figure it out. Let them work through the process. And there are 6 or 7 or 8 different steps from one to the other. So it's just a great skill set, for work. I'm at work and I see people and I'm like, oh no, he is just not thinking this through the right way. And then it also gave me the skill set to be able to say, okay, I don't think you're thinking this through the right way, without it sounding like I'm accusing you of not thinking this through, or I'm calling you stupid because you're not thinking it through. It's like, hey, are there other ways that you think we could be thinking about this, or that we could get to this goal, so that it's inclusive and people are thinking about the group, the needs of the group. It's just an amazing set of skills that I went into Knowles as a student thinking, oh yeah, if I pick up some leadership skills, that's great. I'm here to learn how to kayak. But the byproduct was so much more. I hate to sound like a commercial for Knowles, but it is a great school that literally changed the direction of my life. I was like, I came back and was like, this is what I want to do, and I got to figure out how to get there. And I know that sounds cliche, but that's what happened, and it was a great experience. It's a great school. And the other byproduct is I fell in love with Alaska. I was like, I've got to get back to Alaska, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that. So I'll go to work for Knowles, and they'll pay me to come back to Alaska.
That's just smart. That's
one of my better decisions.
I'm sure that there's someone that I know who he helps organize trips for people. But essentially, one of his thought processes is, what do I want to do? And then he basically creates a trip based around that.
Sure.
Because if it's interesting to him, he's going to want to go on it, but
it's probably going to be interesting to someone else.
Try to do it as well. So yeah, and that's what he goes and does, and I think that's just genius.
Yeah, so I have people pretty frequently say to me, hey, the next time you go to Alaska to go kayaking, let me know. I want to go with you. And they're usually other outdoor instructors, but still. So it is just recently occurring to me, I was like, I should be putting trips together and just making everyone else pay for it so that I can go to Alaska.
Yeah. I'll organize the trip. Just
exactly. I'll organize it. Here's what it'll cost each of us. All right, it'll cost me a little bit less, but this is what it'll cost each of us.
That's it. What I really liked was at one point you talked about one of the reasons your resume popped was because of the sorry, I forget the term. Is it the wilderness?
The emergency medicine.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that, about how so we can get lots of outdoor instructors. It doesn't matter where we are in the world, but I think it's really important as outdoor educators to recognize actually there are times where we need to try and make ourselves stand out as instructors, so our resume or our CV can stand out from the others. I'm now looking back and I'm going, oh man, I wish I knew more about photography to be able to help just add things. So I feel like we're now almost in an age where the CV isn't becoming as important. It still definitely has relevance, but I'm sure a lot of employers are switched on to now just going, I'm just going to look them up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever.
See what they're doing. Yeah.
And using that as a CV. But I've also found that for me, one of the things probably helped me gain employment for other providers is because of some counselling work that I've done before as well. So and that's one of those things which has been applied in lots of different areas of my life as well. So I'm constantly going, I wonder how I could phrase this to help people or get people more involved in a certain task. It's fascinating, just the idea of what we can do to help influence the situation, but going back to how we can help boost our own CV just by following our own interests or pursuing them a little bit further. In some respect, in a similar way to your expeditions, the personal ones that you did, like the Inside Passage, just it all helps build up. And
absolutely, yeah.
And outdoor instructor saying that you've done such big trips, I think it's amazing.
I think what people have to do is find something that they really dig, that they can make a focus. So for me, I really enjoyed the wilderness medicine stuff. And what I realized later was, as I said, everyone gets a wilderness first responder, but so few outdoor educators actually have what we call in the emergency medicine industry, patient contact time. So everyone's got the certification, but no one is really treating people, right? If you're lucky, depending on how you use the term lucky, you may see an injury or two in the course of a year as an outdoor educator, where I was seeing 10 to 15 patients a day for 3 years. So I've treated thousands of patients, and it just sort of makes that skill set hammer home. And at the end of the day, your employer is like, that's their nightmare, is someone getting hurt on a course. And if they can say, oh yeah, but I had an instructor who had this skill set. So if it's emergency medicine, which I think is a good one, if it's work doing big trips, so like, oh, I can totally lead your 6-hour day tour because I've done 60-day trips. That's a piece of cake for me. Or even something like photography or working, videography, working with a GoPro. I'll be teaching for you, but I can give you, publishable photos and video that you can use in marketing and save you a fortune. You got to figure out sort of how you can shine. So for you, it was that sort of therapy stuff, is figuring out some way that makes your CV sort of pop, that someone's gonna, because if you're looking at a pile of 30 or 50 or 100, what's going to make yours stand out? And it's just finding something like that. We'll just sort of gloss over the fact that, yes, you need to know how to write a CV, and your spelling has to be correct and your punctuation has to be correct, right? Hopefully you've already got that. But skill set wise, it's finding things that work for you, right? And the other thing that I see is I do frequently work to help hire instructors, and I see tons of certifications, but I don't see any real world experience. So like I hired a paddling instructor who was a pretty good paddling instructor, and he was like an ACA level 4 coach, which is great. But when I talked to him about, tell me about personal trips that you've done, he'd never done like more than a weekend, and I was like, I'd really like someone who's done 2 weeks in a boat on a daily basis. It changes sort of your perspective on paddling, if that's the skill set we're talking about. But the flip side is, I have no problem here on the East Coast of the United States hiring backpacking instructors who've hiked at least half of the Appalachian Trail. And that's going to give both a level of confidence and a skill set that students are just going to motivate or gravitate towards, right? And when you can, everyone suffers from the imposter syndrome. If you're a backpacker who's hiked half the AT, when it comes to at least to talk about backpacking, you're not going to be suffering from the imposter syndrome, right? And so that makes it easier for you. So figure out sort of a niche for yourself, and how to make that sort of stand out, I think, is a good way to go for the young instructors or the newer instructors.
Yeah. So moving on slightly then. So how do you manage your own development? So within the outdoor, whether that's personal or just like professionally.
It's something I think about a lot. I think a lot about my development as an instructor, and sort of, am I growing just as a human being as well as an instructor, and sort of my skills, right? So it would be very easy for me, after I've been paddling for 25 years, I've been teaching for almost 20, for me to say, I know everything there is to know about paddling. I don't have to go out and practice. I can just do this. And that's just not the case. Is if I'm not doing this, the phrase, if you don't use it, you'll lose it, is absolutely true. And so right now, in a time when I'm not teaching, I make sure that hopefully on a weekly basis, maybe a week and a half, I'm in a boat. It only really takes me 45 minutes or an hour, but I'm going out and I'm working on my skills, and I'll decide today I'm going to work on this, this, and this. And I just want to make sure that I've got those skills, and I'm fluid with those skills, so that if tomorrow someone says, hey, I need a private lesson, and we'll do it socially distanced and wearing masks, but I'm not happy with my skills doing, the low brace, can you demo it, right? And so I'm making sure that those skills for me are working, no matter what they are. And so, like, for instance, my next sort of day of my skills is a rolling day. Is I tend to do, at the beginning of the paddling season and the end of the paddling season, a day of self-rescues and rolling, just so that I know that those skills are wired, so that if I have a really bad day on the water, they're going to work. And because of COVID this year, I didn't create that day at the beginning of the season. It was like, it's been sneaking up on a year since I've rolled a kayak. So the conditions could not be better. It's 90 degrees here in North Carolina today. The water is 85 degrees. There is no problem getting wet. Let's go roll a kayak and have some fun and play with that. So that's sort of the next day that I'm planning. And so for me as a paddling instructor, that's something that I think about a lot, but it delves out into sort of all the other things that I teach. But then the flip side of that is I really worry about sort of just getting stagnant. And so that was why I started learning how to sail. Was I decided, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, you know, it would be really cool to sail across the Atlantic. And I don't know how. I grew up on boats and I live in a kayak, you know, not literally, but figuratively, my life is spent in a kayak. But I don't know how to sail. And I've certainly never crossed an ocean. And I certainly don't have the money for a sailboat. But I was like, let me go through the process of learning how to sail. And so I've been doing that for about 2 or 3 years. And right now I feel like a fairly good sailor. I have a lot to learn still, but I'm fairly comfortable in a boat and I really enjoy it. But it sort of taught me a lot of things, like as an adult, learning something new, going to learn a new skill. It taught me a lot about instructors because I'm seeing all of these sailing instructors. And I'm going to diss the sailing community now. Your ability to teach adults is not good. I'm seeing the instructors are generally guys, almost exclusively, who have been sailing for 1 million years, who are great sailors, but are not trained to be educators. When I'm hiring an outdoor educator, I want them to be an educator first. And then if they can teach, they can learn how to teach anything, right? But if they can't teach, it doesn't matter how much they know. And so I ran into a lot of problems with sailing instructors who were not great. And so I went sort of outside the normal channels and found a woman who is retired, who races sailing dinghies. And I was like, hey, would you give me sailing lessons? And she sort of hemmed and hawed a little bit. She taught for a school, but she taught kids. And she had to sort of get permission from the yacht club she worked for, and they didn't know how to handle it. They were like, what do we do about insurance and stuff? I was like, guys, I'm an outdoor educator. This is how you handle insurance if you don't have it. It's super easy. This is what you do. And so I did 4 lessons with her. Actually, honestly, I did 3 lessons with her. And she said, okay, you don't need me anymore. You're doing great. I was like, no, we're doing 1 more lesson. I'm not ready. And then I did a sailing course with a big sailing organization here in the United States, which was okay. It wasn't great, but it was really expensive. And so down the road, what I think about for my growth is I'd like to sort of marry the expedition kayaking stuff that I do with sailing, because you can learn how to sail, but there's no real sort of, I want to sail to Alaska now. I want to sail up the East Coast to Newfoundland and Labrador. And there's very few choices to sort of do that sort of thing. And that's a sort of realm where I think, yeah, my sailing skills I might not have 30 years of sailing experience, but there are not many sailors who have my level of expedition experience. And so I can bring a lot of that to sort of that environment. Talk about making a resume pop. That's sort of my angle with that sort of thing. I want to go back a little bit. I dissed the sailing community in the United States. The sailing community in the United States is very good at teaching children to sail. We are so good at that. And we teach thousands and thousands and thousands of children to sail at camps and at schools and things like that. But if you're an adult, the system is not set up for success. And that's something that I think that now as a sailor, I can say that's something I think we need to work at, is that I'm just not impressed with the options. So something for the sailors in the United States to work on, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
That's amazing. It's really fascinating that you said about setting up the teaching for adults as well. For me personally, I tend to work with a lot of kids primarily, which I absolutely love. But yeah, so trying to, when I've done assessments in the past and I go, okay, right, cool, you're going to do your lead climbing teaching, so work towards qualification like that. And it was so funny, like me trying to adapt my style of, or almost my default style of instructing, feel like to an adult audience. It was outrageous. That. So it's really interesting, like something for me to certainly reflect on as well. Or anyone, I guess.
And 95% of what I teach is adults. So I teach just a handful of things for kids, and I'm far less comfortable in that environment just because I don't do it as much. But I'll tell you, the kids are hard work, man. They are unpredictable. You may go in with a teaching plan, and that plan goes out the window 5 minutes later because these kids are sort of on their own sort of little level. And yeah, it's a great skill set for me to work on, sort of for my development, is to sort of continue that growth by pushing me again out of my comfort zone. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, so it's so good to try and find those different things to challenge ourselves, and it pushes a little bit, maybe test a little bit, but yeah, keeps us thinking and keeps us developing as well.
Absolutely.
So one of my favorite videos that you've done was it was a few months ago, but it definitely got me thinking again. And it was one where you discovered, or you were being tested for a form of skin cancer.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really thought provoking. I was wondering, would you have to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, let me say that millions of people a year get diagnosed with skin cancer. It's not a big deal. I'm going to be fine. It's really just scary. So there is, I forget which cancer it is, but it's super common. And it's not because I got sunburned last year. It's because I wasn't careful when I was younger. And it doesn't help that I've worked the bulk of my adult life now in the outdoors. But it's a scary thing when the doctor says, "Oh no, that thing on your nose is cancer, and we're going to cut it off, and it'll probably be fine." But still, that's a scary sentence to hear. And so it sort of changed the way I was already pretty careful about sun protection. But it ramped things up for me. And so I generally don't like putting chemicals directly on my skin. I've always used sunscreen on my face. I don't have a lot of hair, so on my face and my head and the back of my neck. But I use a lot of sun protective clothing. And so right now I'm wearing, I think all of my clothes at this point are sun protect or UPF clothing to protect my skin. I wear long sleeves and long pants when I'm outdoors almost exclusively. When I'm paddling, I wear shorts or a bathing suit, but I wear a long sleeve shirt. I wear a buff around my neck. I wear a hat, and then I'll put sunscreen on my face and my ears and stuff like that. But it dramatically ramped up sort of my awareness of it. And so for your younger outdoor educators, you need to be thinking about that now, and using sun protective clothing and good head coverage and good sunscreens that are mineral based. And I'll tell you from reading about it, most people put on sunscreen and sort of rub it into their skin until it disappears. And if you rub it into your skin until it disappears, it's not really working the way it's designed to work. So you have to have that white stuff on your skin in order for it to actually be working as effectively as it's designed to work. So most people don't use sunscreen. When they do, they don't use it correctly, which I think is par for the course for the way we do things. But yeah, so it's a scary thing. And I had a pea-sized bump on my nose that they said, "Oh no, that's skin cancer." And then I went back and they found more in my neck. And actually I go back again on Friday, and they've had to take more out of this one twice. So I'm hoping that we're done there. But long term, it'll be fine. It's a scary thing. And now every time, of course, anytime I find a bump on my body, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's more cancer, right? So in the scheme of things, it's not a big deal. It's just scary. But for new outdoor educators, for young outdoor educators, you need to be thinking about this long term. This is a hazard for us. Is that, yeah, being outside in the sun is a great thing, but getting a sunburn is not a great thing. Something that I'm not great about is sunglasses. I generally don't wear sunglasses, and I think I need to be more careful about that. So yeah, just think about what you're doing and take care of yourself. Self-care is something as an outdoor educator is super important. And that means, dressing appropriately for the environment. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not in a situation to take care of the people that you're leading, right, or the people that you're teaching. So you need to sort of be on top of that stuff. And then the other sort of part of that is you need to have a sort of a set way that you do things. Otherwise, you're not going to remember to do things. I am not a terribly organized person. Despite what you're seeing behind me, my gear is pretty organized. But this side of my office is not that organized. But for things like that, I have a very small selection of clothing, and I make sure that all of them work for the environments that I work in. And so I'm a little bit picky about that sort of stuff. But so for new outdoor educators, you got to make that a priority. Is self-care, and sun protection is a big part of that.
Yeah, it was. I think I don't know. Maybe like isn't the right word, but yeah, that video it struck home for me a little bit. I think it opened my eyes a lot to it really. So yeah, I just want to say thanks for sharing that, because I'm not everyone would feel comfortable
Yeah.
in that.
Well,
But it's a really important message. And
my
yeah,
my YouTube channel is really essentially life of an outdoor educator, right? And so right now that's a little tough because I'm not teaching. Whereas last year when I started the channel, I was teaching literally every weekend, and so I had tons of content. But that is part of the life of an outdoor educator, right? Is sort of thinking about those processes. Yeah.
yeah. And going back a little bit to the self-care thing, I see. So I know traditionally we always think of like the UK there's fingers crossed that some the American audience will listen to this, but like we always think that the UK is just like this island which just rains constantly. But believe it or not, we do get quite strong periods of time where it is really hot, and so that gives us something else to moan about in terms of the weather, which is great. So it keeps us happy. but like, but we then go into the stage of see so many instructors. I don't think it necessarily matters what age, but just going yes, and then like just rolling up the sleeves and trying to get the best tan possible, which I kind of get, but I've seen so many times just going, I'm not too sure this is like taking it to like unhealthy levels.
Right. We've been trained somehow that tan skin is great.
Yeah.
And being in the sun is good, but yeah, we need to be. I'm not. This is far from my specialty, but I think that even a little bit of tanning is okay. Though I think that over time it does increase your chances, but it's burning that is particularly at a young age that sets you up for that. And so someone please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be corrected on that. But yeah, but we've been taught that, a tan, look at famous people who we've been told we need to idolize for some reason. And they're all tan and toned and beautiful. And we all come in different shapes and sizes, and one is not better than the other, Frequently I see here in the American South, I have plenty of students who are, let's say, plus size or bigger than they would like to be, or society says they should be. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to fit in a kayak or a PFD. And I was like, you're going to fit. And we come in all shapes and sizes, and that's perfectly cool. Let's find something that works for you. At the end of the day, that's the important thing. So I'm not sure how I got there from self-care, but I did. Yeah.
We did it.
Oh, I was talking about tan. Right. Yeah. We're all supposed to be tan. We don't all have to be tan. Yeah.
Yeah. And then going on to the self-care just a little bit more, something I see is just think I see a lot of outdoor instructors. I feel like a lot of the people I know just seem constantly injured, and I don't know if there's like a correlation there. There must be.
Well, I mean, it's because we're active and we're doing things constantly and we're pushing those personal limits. But you're right, it's problematic. And so I think a lot about how long am I going to be able to do this, right? I'm in my early 50s and I've had a physical life. And so I'm not quite sure how long I can keep teaching and keep lugging kayaks, but I see young instructors with injuries all the time. And I'm like, if I'm feeling it, you're going to be feeling it. And you're in worse shape than I am, in this regard. So yeah, you need to be careful. It's totally a self-care thing. And when I was in my 30s, I could eat whatever I wanted and I didn't have to work out. And now I'm in my 50s and I can't eat anything I want. And I work out all the time just to sort of stay even. So like the older you get, the harder it gets, and that's something that, when you're in your 20s or even early 30s, you don't think of, but it's a fact. It's a physical job. And the things that people don't think about, I think I mentioned this in a video lately, is the good parts and the bad parts about being an outdoor educator. I didn't realize I was going to spend the bulk of my life moving gear, moving 12 kayaks onto a trailer and off a trailer and to the water line and then back from the water line. And yeah, And I need 37 paddles today, and I need 15 PFDs, and where's my first aid kit, and who's got the epinephrine, and it's a tremendous amount of lugging gear, and which is physical, right? And you're working all day in the sun, and it's a physically demanding, exhausting job. And if you're not doing that self-care stuff, it only gets worse, I work with instructors who'll teach, for 2 or 3 paddling classes on a Saturday when it's 90 degrees out. And I'm like, no, if I do that, if I were to teach 3 classes in a row on a Saturday, on Sunday, I'm not moving. It just isn't happening. And so, most of them are younger than me. But I'm really careful sort of about taking care of myself physically and psychologically. And so even if my body was okay after teaching 3 classes in one day, my brain would be mush the next day,
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. I just keep thinking about, when you're saying the just lugging stuff around, just carrying loads of gear all the time. And every time I just think of just boats, and then just going, no worries, I'll carry it myself. And I'm going, you don't need it though. It's fine. I'll give you a hand. It's okay. Definitely.
How many times have you told students 2 people have to carry a boat? I don't want to see anyone single carrying a boat, and then you go single carry your own boat, right? All the time, because I've got to get back to where they're going, and I've got to be there. I've got to leave after them and get there before them because I need to do this next thing, and I don't have time to wait for someone to come back and help me carry my boat, right? So it's about self-care, absolutely, Yeah,
you're so right, Right, so if you've still got time, Brett, it'd be great if we could move on to some quick fire questions.
Sure, go for it. Now I'm a little scared. Okay.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll go easy on you. You're all good.
Okay.
You're all good. Favorite outdoor space to be?
Anywhere there's water.
Anywhere, as long as there's water.
Anywhere. If I can put a boat in the water, I don't even really care what kind of boat at this point. If I can put a boat in the water, I'm happy. Yeah.
Not even fussy at this point.
Nope.
Brilliant. All right then. So, favorite piece of gear or equipment?
There's a lot of gear on the wall behind me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen a few videos. You've got this amazing organizational setup as well.
I need to do a video with it all. It's a little out of control. And really, it's organization so I can teach. So if I need a stove, this is just a box of stoves, right? So it's like, today's class, I need this stove. So it's all in. I got tired of looking for stuff. You might be able to tell that I'm distracting you from the answer. Okay, so favorite piece of gear right now is probably the shirts that I'm wearing. So, all right, this is a little odd. Despite the wall behind me, I'm a fairly strict minimalist. And so I have a uniform that I wear every day. And so my non-teaching uniform is a pair of jeans and a gray shirt. And then I've got a couple of things that I wear when I'm teaching. And so I just switched the gray shirts that I wear. This is so weird. And I have switched to the Patagonia Capilene Cool long sleeve sun protective shirts. They are super lightweight. They dry super fast. They don't pick up odors. They have a hood, which is nice. This one doesn't, but most of them have a hood. So that I can get sort of that extra sun protection when I need it. This is probably my favorite piece of gear. Yeah, but I could go on for a long time with pieces of gear that I really like.
I think that needs to be an episode in itself. Or
it could easily be. Yeah, it could easily be. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So here we go. So try and complete this sentence for me then. So a good instructor always has.
Ooh, an open mind. That's the first thing that came to mind. But I've got to add, a good instructor always has water and a first aid kit.
Yeah.
I think the open mind is the most important thing. We see so much variation in people's wants and desires in classes. And so I think being able to adapt to your students' needs, and for me, teaching adults, those are very varied, extremely varied, into what, someone who's showing up for a day of paddling is what are your goals? Where do you see yourself? And so for my ability to fine tune a class for someone for their needs is super important. I'm sorry, my dog is fussing. My dog sleeps in my office, and she was fussing. Sorry. So I think that sort of ability to adapt. But if you want something more physical, then yeah, water and a first aid kit when it's handy, super handy. And then you ready? You're doing a book of tips, and I'm doing a book of tips. You ready? On a hot day when you've been paddling, the ultimate thing to help rehydrate is pickles and pickle juice. So when I'm teaching, I know, right? When I'm teaching, I have a big Sprinter van that's a camper, but I use it as an office when I'm teaching. And so I have a big cooler in it. So when I'm teaching in the summer, I fill it with ice and drinks and my lunch and stuff like that. And it started as a joke. I don't know how it happened, but there was like a running joke, and someone was like, "Wait, so you're not bringing pickles?" And it was like, "No, I brought pickles." And on a hot day, first, pickles are great, and if they're in a cooler, they're nice and cold. But just straight up drinking pickle juice, it's totally rehydrating. It's sodium, which you've lost from sweat. It's cool. It's refreshing. So there's your crazy tip: is a jar of pickles on ice on a hot day.
That's amazing. I'll be amazed if anyone, if I do an outdoor instructor chat with anyone again, if they say pickles, it'll blow my mind.
There you go. I don't think they will say pickles, but my goal is to get everyone saying pickles.
Stop. Brilliant. So, okay then. So, what would you like to know more about?
Oh man, everything. For me right now, as a new sailor, I am obsessed with like fine tuning my sail trim, and I can't find someone who can teach it to me effectively. I'm watching videos and I'm reading books, but I want to get on the boat with someone who really understands sail trim. And that's the thing I really want to know. Is it what the question was? Something I want to know more about? Sail trim. Yeah. Sail trim. Yeah. Right now it's trimming sails effectively. It's sails are incredibly like super simple until you realize how incredibly complex they are. And for me as an outdoor educator, that sort of stretching of my brain in terms of learning something new and to the level of like I expect myself to be at the level of depth in a sailboat that I am in a kayak, and that's where I want to be. But it took me 25 years to get to that level in a kayak, and I just don't have that patience or frankly that kind of time anymore. So I get frustrated with myself. It's like, man, I should know how to do that. Why don't I know how to do that? And so that's why I think it's important to be learning something new, trying, not just sticking in the realm that you teach or that you really enjoy, is go out and learn something new, because it'll help you in other ways that you can't even think of. Boy, that was a segue right there, man.
But you might have just answered the last question, which is,
okay, let's hear it.
What's maybe best advice for an outdoor instructor?
Oh, just be active in the outdoors. Be authentic. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to that. As long as you follow it up with, but let's find out the answer to that, is perfectly acceptable. We live in this world where we're supposed to know absolutely everything about everything, and that's just not possible. So don't be afraid to say to a student, hey, I don't know, but I'll figure it out and I'll let you know. That's particularly young instructors get super afraid. We talked very briefly about the imposter syndrome. They're super afraid of that and feel like they have to have every answer. And you don't have to have every answer. Yeah. Say I don't know. That's authentic. And just as long as you figure out what the answer is and get back to that student, everything's going to be cool.
Yeah. So right. I think that was early days. I wish I knew that one a little bit sooner about just going, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of me, right? Of me becoming an outdoor educator as an adult, as a second or third or fourth career, is like I was like, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Yeah, absolutely.
So good. Well, Brett, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I wanted to ask, is there like a question that you'd like to ask the audience, or have like a final thoughts?
I want to know what's your audience's goal for as outdoor educators. Like, where do you, like, I ask frequently, either where do you see yourself in 2 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Right? And if you can answer those two questions, I think you're in a good place. Think about sort of where you want to be and how you're working towards it. That's my question. So let's see that down in the comments below, is sort of what your goals are. And then all you got to do is find someone to help you figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's so much easier to know what to do once you know where you're going.
Once you know where exactly right. Exactly right.
Good. Brett, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
So with all this stuff, like, please make sure to check out all of Brett's stuff online as well. I'll make sure there's links everywhere for all this. Make sure to give it a like. Make sure you give Brett's stuff a like. Share this with other outdoor instructors. Subscribe to Brett's channel. If you want to subscribe to mine, then great, but definitely subscribe to Brett. And until
I appreciate that. I'm so bad at asking people to subscribe to my channel, so thank you for doing it for me.
You're welcome, mate. And yeah, until next time, take care. Peace.
Wow, so for me, that outdoor instructor chat flew by. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you, Brett, for taking the time to take part in this outdoor instructor chat as well. Make sure to check out his stuff as well to show him some support and some love online. If you're interested in taking part in an outdoor instructor chat yourself, then make sure to just drop me a message. Or if you've got questions that you'd like me to ask other outdoor instructors, then again, just drop me a message. I'll be more than happy to try and ask those questions and try and find out the answers for you. But other than that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And until next time, take care.